what's extreme, what's barbaric is, in a civilized society, you do not punish innocent people for someone else's crime.
I'm so grateful you're here to share your stories. Thank you. What was it like for each of you learning for the first time that you were conceived in rape?
I was 12 years old, and up until then, my life was relatively normal and actually wonderful. Very close to my father, my mom's husband. And when I was told who my biological father actually was, it was devastating. I felt like I lost my place in the family instantly. I didn't know how to process what I had just learned. And my parents tried to support me in the way that they could and the tools that they had at the time. But my way of processing that information was to keep it a secret and to kind of stuff all that shame down. And so for the next, I'd say, decade of my life, I numbed with alcohol and drugs, and I severed friendships, and I just struggled. And then it wasn't until I shared the story of my birth with a therapist in my 20s, just saying it out loud, immediately I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. I don't know what I was expecting. I thought people were going to be repulsed or maybe angry that I was here. I didn't know what her views were, but she was gentle and she received it in such a compassionate way and gave me tools, work to do, self-work and journaling, and through prayer when I started sharing it just with close friends and, my now husband. Every reaction was so compassionate that the lie that I wasn't worthy just kind of started to fade, conversation by conversation.
Thank you, Anne. Rebecca, what was your experience learning about this for the first time, about the circumstances of your conception?
I was 18 when I learned how I was conceived, and I instantly thought of what people say about abortion in cases of rape, and especially in cases of rape. And I instantly felt targeted and devalued by society. I asked my adoptive father, how do you feel about abortion? And what about cases of rape? And he started to say, well, I've always felt like, who am I to say what a woman can or cannot do with her own body? And I immediately said, you mean to tell me that my birth mother's, her body, her choice was more important than my whole entire life? Really, Dad? You really believe that? And he instantly snapped out of it. And he said, no, I don't believe that. Wow. How would I ever get to a point where I would believe such a thing? I mean, especially as an adoptive father. And he said that, being a professor on a liberal campus, that it was just expected that if you were progressive-minded, you would be pro-choice. And so I was able to instantly change his mind about abortion. But then when I met my birth mother a year later, and she told me that if it had been legal, she would have aborted me. And she, in fact, went to 2 illegal abortions, and I was almost killed. But she backed out because of the law. And I asked her, you don't mean if you had to do it all over again? And she said, no. And then just told me, you don't know what it was like. And she maintained that position for the next 6 years and then changed her mind about abortion. And it was great to hear. But by the time she shared that with me, I knew my worth. I'm not worthless, but priceless. And all of you are too. And it's out of gratitude for my life being spared that I want others to have the same. I'm just as worthy of love and life as anyone else, but so are all of those who are being aborted every day.
Thank you, Rebecca. What about you, Stevenson?
I found out at 8 years old that I was the wrong color. That's what they said at school. I'm like, what do you mean I'm the wrong color? I came home and found out that my family's white and I'm mixed, I'm brown. And so that started a conversation of, I found out I was a foster kid and adopted at age 2. So I didn't actually know my conception story until I was 27. I actually found my birth mom, tracked her down, and I call her my hero because I found out that she was raped by 5 men, right? And got pregnant in a mental institution, and they were pressuring her to abort me every day. And she fought for me. She carried me homeless by the end of the pregnancy, living on the streets, and chose life for me. And that, like Ann was saying, that worth thing for me, I always question, like, why did my mom not want me? You know, I had this loving, amazing family, but still, even though I knew I was loved, that was still something I was longing. Didn't even realize I needed it until I met my mom, and she tells me, looks me in the eyes and said, I love you. I would have never given you up, you know, if I could have kept you. And I needed to hear that because I do have worth and I do have value.
Thank you for sharing that, Stevenson. Lisa.
I am one of 4 adopted kids. My parents made it very special for us. So it was our bedtime story, talking about how much they wanted us and how special we were. And so I never looked at adoption as something that was like second class. I always looked at it as something that was special. Like God chooses us to be adopted into his family, and my parents got to choose me. So in my 20s, I was having some health issues, and I decided to reach out and find my birth mother. And through the process of meeting her is when I found out how I was conceived. And for me, it wasn't a feeling of no value. It actually made me think and appreciate her so much more for choosing life. And she never thought about aborting me. She wanted me to be in a family where I had 2 parents that could give me what I needed. And still to this day, she's like, that's one of the times where I really listened to God, and to see the outcome and to see how your life has been is so special. So I never struggled with the identity of being from rape. I just felt like it allowed me to have more poignant conversations with people when they bring up that subject of abortion.
Friends and family that don't know my story will say it'd be unthinkable. It's gross for a woman to force her to have a baby through rape or incest. And I have always had a pro-life stance, but until getting familiar with Lila's work and her videos, I didn't know what an abortion was. I truly didn't know the mechanics of pulling apart a live human being to abort a baby. So when that sinks in, and to think that that is what is expected of a mother like my own, it's intense. Letting it in, opening my heart to hear those words and how they actually would have impacted my life has been a lot. People almost can't fathom a woman choosing life in that situation.
Did your mother explain why she chose life for you?
She did. She was already a devout Catholic, so abortion was never a consideration outside of rape, just in her values. After she was attacked, her husband was not on board with keeping the baby. They were traumatized. He was angry with the attacker. She repeated over and over, why do I have to suffer more violence? I've already gone through violence. I do not want to continue to experience violence. And it was after a meeting with their parish priest that my dad has told me that, he walked into the meeting unsure, and by the end of that meeting, he was overjoyed to welcome me into their lives. That priest married my husband and I 30 years later. They were unable to have children, so they both together looked at it as miraculous that they were going to welcome a child together into the world.
I've heard people say, well, if my wife was raped, like there's no way I could love that child. But your father who raised you, like you never felt unloved, right?
Never. And everyone loves my dad. They're always, and we love your dad. I know who they're talking about, my dad. He is my rock. I never once, that's why it was so devastating to find out I wasn't related to him. In, my capacity to understand that at 12. I've since accepted his fatherly love and, our fatherly love. And that's healed all of those lies that I told myself, and that I think the enemy just fanned those flames for a lot of years.
We get called monstrous child, demon seed, evil seed, horrible reminder, tainting the gene pool. I've been called a rape trophy, and even told that if you cared about your birth mother at all, you would have killed yourself a long time ago. So I've definitely got a lot of the brunt of it. And we are despised for no sin of ours. I ask people, do you advocate for rape victims to be able to pay someone to kill the rapist? Or just her innocent child? Because that's what abortion is. You're paying a hitman. They're paid assassins to snuff out a life. You don't ever hear anybody supporting that. Most of those people are anti-death penalty. It's amazing how these same people are so quick to give the death penalty to the innocent child. A lot of people will try to summarily dismiss our stories like, oh, well, good for you, good for your mother. Isn't it just about choice? No, it's about our humanity. And we deserve to live. I deserved the protection I received at the time.
We have a society that so promotes that, like, these are the exceptions, this is what happens. So I guess I look at my story as an opportunity to share, an opportunity to minister to. And I think so many people, like you're talking about the things that they say, my identity is not found in the fact that I was born out of rape. My identity is found in Christ. I feel like educating, especially our youth, because I'm a teacher, explaining to them those situations so they understand, because we're inundated with it in society. And so I think when they can put a face to someone that was born out of rape, a lot of times that changes their perspective when they can see how God has used my life and how God has allowed me to mentor kids, all those types of different things. And I think sometimes just having a face with it changes people's perspectives because they're just used to hearing the stats.
My life and my worth that we've talked about, it's not determined on the conception and how I was conceived, how I was created, right? Because I know that God created me for a purpose, and I do have worth and value. So for me, it's like hopefully putting a face to that stance. That if you look at me and hold that stance, I hope you say, okay, well, you're telling me that I don't matter, I don't have worth, I don't have value, and I would argue that. I have 3 beautiful daughters that wouldn't be here if somebody didn't see worth and value in me. Even when the world would say that I wasn't worth it, which they did for my mom, even with only 11-year-old mental capacity, the mind of a child, she knew that her baby mattered and had worth. So I take it personal. I do matter, and my conception does not define my worth or my value. Where a lot of times when people have a different position on this, they would say, well, I'm thankful you're here. I'm not necessarily in favor of abortion, but, your mom still should have had the choice to terminate you. That's hard to hear. But as a minister and trying to minister that situation but now you have a face to put with that. So I hope, that there's seeds that are planted in those encounters and relationships that we build, that even if the position doesn't change, like they don't change their position, there's a seed that's planted that they walk away from that conversation and be like, I liked him, he was kind, he wasn't weird, We have a teacher, an attorney, and a minister, a speaker, and a businesswoman here, and we're everywhere.
Yeah. I was just asked that question yesterday, that the same kind of reaction, good for you, good for your mom. She had a choice. Every woman should have a choice. And I empathize with that answer because I struggled with that question, leaning towards agreeing with it before I understood what abortion was. When I realized this is a human baby at the moment of conception. It's not a healthcare choice. It's not a freedom of my body choice. You're choosing to end a life. So I understand the question, and I do think we should all have choices, but I don't think in any way a society should allow a choice to murder. So it's simple. I mean, you're not making a choice about your body, you're taking a choice away from another body and another soul and another human being. That's not a choice.
People act like we're really extreme to take this position. And what's extreme, what's barbaric is, in a civilized society, you do not punish innocent people for someone else's crime. You just don't, and that's what you're doing. And it's also absurd to suggest that more violence in your body is going to bring healing. And it's like your mother said, she doesn't want more violence inside her body, and abortion is violence. And of course, Lila, you do a really good job of explaining that to people, reminding people how violent it is. I had a pro-abortion activist one time. After my speech, she asked to speak to me privately, and she started crying, and she shared that she had been raped when she was 13, and she said nobody could ever convince me that abortion should be okay, and especially in cases of rape. And she just started bawling, and she said, but after hearing you speak, like, you've completely changed my mind. Like, you're a good person. I cannot look you in the eyes and say, I think you should be dead right now. She's like, I can't do that. And she's like, I'm going to lose all my friends. Look at, they're all angry that I'm here speaking to you. So telling our stories does have an impact.
And I look at it too as, not only am I adopted, but my husband and I struggled with fertility for years and had a failed adoption before we had our kids. And so educating about how long it is to wait to adopt, right? So those infants have that right. And there are so many people waiting and willing to adopt them. And so I think that's also another point and another way that we can address it with them.
This is, I'm the emotional one up here. I'm the only guy on this panel, but I'm the crier. I'm just so thankful. Like, the Lord is so good. You all matter, and I'm honored just to be here with you. I'm honored to share air with you, and that together I think we have the power to change positions one heart and one mind at a time, and be bold enough to share our stories, and courageous. I'm just trying to be faithful to what God's called me to do. But I'm honored to be here.
I'm so grateful to have met you all. And I had never met anyone with the same conception story as myself. And speaking to each of you and then learning about your networks, like, oh, there's a lot of us, which was eye-opening to me. And it's such a blessing to know you're not alone. So I would hope if anyone's watching this that shares a similar story to us, they know they're not alone. We are proof you're not alone.
There's tens of thousands born every year. The only studies done show that there's between 25 to 30,000 rape-related pregnancies each year. And there's a lot of people living in silence, living with the pain of this stigma that society places on us. And so not only are we hopefully helping to change people's views on abortion, but also helping those who have lived with this stigma, and to show them that, we're all normal, and, you're valuable.
I think there was a little fear in coming, right? And I think it was wondering how people who are victims of rape would perceive themselves, right? And so it was refreshing, because just like you, Anne, I've never met anyone from that situation, to see how God has used each of us and how God is using our story, and learning that that's not what defines us. And so it's been way more encouraging than I anticipated it would be. And it's just cool to see how God can use, like you were saying, their brokenness in what man intended evil for good.
Thank you all so much for your courage and your love. It makes a huge difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Lila.
Thanks, Lila.
I think the most powerful thing about being part of these panels is hearing all the different stories. I've never met another person who was conceived out of rape, so hearing their stories and seeing how they're impacting others is just a really cool and powerful thing.
I want other people who were conceived and raped to know that they were meant for good and not for evil. The rapist is not their creator, and they have an infinite worth. They're priceless.
To anyone out there that was conceived in rape and is struggling, you are going to be okay. I would not trade who I am, and you will get there. For me, taking the first step was sharing it with someone else and sharing how you're feeling and asking for help.
No matter how you were conceived, it didn't devalue your life. I do have purpose. I do have worth, and so do you.